Hello, welcome to another edition of Humble Theology. My name is John, and in this series we are looking at the book of Leviticus, and we are in chapter 12. Chapter 12 is really short, maybe I think the shortest chapter in Leviticus, but it's dealing with cleanliness of the woman after giving childbirth. You say, well, what's that have to do with anything? And at first glance, it might be just kind of like, okay, well, this is an interesting exchange here. But hopefully you've read it. I'm not going to reread it here, but let's discuss it a little bit. The gist of having the woman to be identified as ritually or ceremonially unclean or sinful in a sense in childbirth is that she has basically brought forth another sinner into the world. And this is interesting because in the sense that we would say, well, this is being given to God's people. So if they're God's people, God's covenant people, his Old Testament church, we would maybe say, why is childbirth now excluding women for the period that's given here for their childbirth and recovery afterwards? Well, why are they identified as unclean during this time? And of course, there's the whole issue of, there's blood involved and things like this. But again, the idea is to point the people, the law. Why was the law given? To educate the people to know what sin is. I would not know coveting except the law said, do not covet. So these types of things give us an insight into, well, if we just keep going around saying everything's fine and I'm a covenant person, I've had a child, nothing's wrong. Here is an instance God is saying, here's a chance and an opportunity to look and reflect on inherent sin. That in bringing another person into the world, you are bringing another sinner into the world. Now, you, again, may believe and identify as God's covenant people, so how dare you call somebody unrighteous? Well, that's what Leviticus 12 is doing here. It's saying, you're going to need to go through this ceremony, this time period as well, to be considered clean again. And it's within God's covenant people that this ceremony, this ritual is being given, because he's given his people the means to be clean. So again, this identifies back with Jesus. He is the one who brings us purification, cleansing of sin. It's not because we're born into the right family, the right church, the right denomination, whatever. It's through Christ, the provision of God that declares us and cleanses us from our sin. So that's what's in scope here. And although that's the lesson the Israelites were to learn from this, we can tell by Jesus's day and age that point gets totally overridden, because in one of the disputes with the scribes and Pharisees, they go, well, we're not in bondage to anyone. We have even Abraham as our father. So they looked at hereditary righteousness by just saying, look, we're of the right people. Of course we're righteous. And Jesus says, no, unless you're born again, unless you're born from above, and all the other passages we could point out, there needs to be this cleansing that comes from God. So that's the point and gist of Leviticus 12 here. Yes, there are a lot of fine points from other commentaries about why is a boy 7 and then a total of 40 days until the mom goes through purification for that. But if giving birth to a girl, it's 80 days. And the most consistent I've seen is that the reason giving birth to a boy is a little bit less for purification is because circumcision is also added, and that'll come up in later topics when we look at baptism and things like that in those chapters. But that's said to why the purification period for the mom is half the time for a boy than it is for a girl. Because the idea of circumcision, the cutting away of sin, is brought upon the male child at 8 days. So It is interesting. I wouldn't make too much of it, but the only time we see this ritual carried out, where it's explicitly mentioned that this is performed, this purification after so many days, is in the birth of Jesus. And Mary, goes, they circumcise Jesus on the 8th day, but it's after the time of purification is complete, so the 40 days, Joseph and Mary bring Jesus to the temple, and they're looking to have this purification done, and they bring the 2 turtle doves, which identifies him not only with our sinfulness, identifies him with humanity, but it also identifies them in their impoverished estate. Mary and Joseph weren't rich by any means. And again, some people will take this, well, here's proof then to the Catholics. Oh, Mary had to go through purification. Yeah, I've seen that used and tried before. You could try that with them if you want, but they'll just say the same thing. Well, Jesus was sinless, and yet he goes through baptism and this circumcision and all this kind of stuff. So he's just identifying with us. Well, Mary's just identifying with us as well as what they would say. So I don't hold that, but again, if you try to have that debate with Roman Catholics and you try to say, well, look, here's proof in Mary's purification that she needed cleansing, I would agree with that, but the Roman Catholic friends would not. So anyway, that's the gist of this. You aren't just born into righteousness because of your family, heritage, race, lineage, whatever, church, denomination. You have to be cleansed by God and by the means he prescribes. So if you have any further questions, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff, and I will see you again next time. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.